July 11th, 1943. 2:30 hours. Farmhouse, near Gela, Sicily. Private James Reilly of the 82nd Airborne hit the ground hard, his parachute tangling in olive trees behind a Sicilian farmhouse. The jump had gone wrong. Scattered drops, anti-aircraft fire, winds pushing C-47 transports off course. Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily, was supposed to be textbook airborne assault. Instead, it was chaos. Reilly had no idea where his squad was, where the objective was, or even if he'd landed in friendly territory. He cut himself free from the harness, gathered his rifle and equipment, and tried to orient himself. Dawn was hours away. Gunfire echoed from multiple directions. Impossible to tell if it was Allied or Axis, miles away or dangerously close. He needed to find his unit or at least other American paratroopers before German patrols found him. Then he heard voices. Italian. Close. Coming from the farmhouse. Reilly froze. He was alone, deep in enemy territory, with Italian civilians, or possibly enemy soldiers, 50 yards away. His training screamed at him to move, find cover, avoid contact. But he was exhausted from the jump, disoriented, and frankly terrified. Making noise moving through unfamiliar terrain and darkness could get him killed faster than staying put. The farmhouse door opened. An older man stepped out, clearly civilian, wearing work clothes, holding an oil lamp. He walked directly toward the olive grove, where Reilly crouched, moving with purpose like he knew exactly where the American paratrooper was hiding. Reilly raised his rifle, finger on trigger. If this was Italian militia or German patrol, he'd have to shoot first and run. The man stopped 10 feet away, raised his hands showing they were empty, and spoke in heavily accented English. "American soldier, you are hurt." Reilly didn't lower the rifle. "Who are you?" "I am Giuseppe Russo. This is my farm. I saw your parachute. Germans patrol this road. You cannot stay outside. Come inside. My family will help." "Why would you help me?" Reilly asked, suspicion mixing with desperate hope. Giuseppe's face was difficult to read in lamplight. "Because you are soldier far from home. Because war is not your fault. Because my wife would kill me if I left wounded boy in our olive grove." He paused. "Also because my son fights for Italy. I hope if he is lost somewhere someone helps him too." That answer, honest, human, complicated, convinced Reilly more than any promise of safety could have. He lowered his rifle and followed Giuseppe toward the farmhouse, where the Russo family would shelter him for 3 days while German patrols searched for scattered American paratroopers. What neither Giuseppe nor Reilly knew yet was that the Russo family's son, Corporal Antonio Russo, was at that moment fighting Americans on the other side of Sicily, defending the very invasion Reilly had come to support. The Russos would shelter an enemy soldier while their own son fought that enemy's army, and somehow they would maintain their humanity through that impossible contradiction. Operation Husky. The invasion. The Allied invasion of Sicily, July 10th, August 17th, 1943, was the first major Allied operation against Axis territory in Europe. After North Africa's liberation, Sicily was the next logical target, close to North Africa, strategically positioned in Mediterranean, and capturing it would threaten Italy itself, potentially knocking Mussolini's regime out of the war. The invasion involved massive Allied forces, 7 divisions landing on Sicily's southern coast, supported by naval bombardment and airborne operations. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions were tasked with securing key positions inland before beach landings, disrupting Axis communications, and creating chaos behind enemy lines. The airborne assault was disaster. High winds, inexperienced pilots, and German anti-aircraft fire scattered paratroopers across southern Sicily. Of 3,400 men from 82nd Airborne's 505th Regiment, fewer than 200 landed near their objective. The rest were scattered across 50 miles of hostile territory, isolated, disoriented, hunted by German patrols and Italian militia. Private James Reilly, 22, from Brooklyn, had jumped from C-47 transport at 1:45 hours July 11th. He was supposed to land near Gela with his squad, secure a road junction, and hold it until beach forces arrived. Instead, he landed alone miles from objective in farmland behind German defensive positions. For the scattered paratroopers, survival depended on reaching Allied lines, linking with other paratroopers, or if isolated, finding civilians willing to hide them from German patrols. Some Sicilian civilians helped Allied soldiers, others turned them in to Germans. Still others remained neutral, too frightened to involve themselves. The Russo family chose to help, despite the personal cost, and despite knowing their own son fought for the other side. The Russo family. Giuseppe Russo, 58, owned a small farm outside Gela, olive groves, vegetable gardens, a few animals. He'd farmed this land his entire life, survived Italian unification's upheavals, WWI's hardships, and now found himself in the middle of another war he didn't want and couldn't escape. His wife Maria, 55, managed the household with practical efficiency born from decades of Sicilian farming life where nothing came easy and waste was sin. She could stretch meager rations to feed family and unexpected guests, treat injuries with folk medicine and fierce determination, and maintain household order when the world outside descended into chaos. Their son Antonio, 24, had been conscripted into Italian army in 1941. He served in North Africa, survived battles against British, and was now stationed in western Sicily as part of coastal defense forces. The Russos hadn't seen him in 18 months. Letters arrived sporadically, heavily censored, revealing little except that he was alive. His last letter, received 2 weeks before invasion, mentioned defending Sicily's coast against expected Allied attack. Their daughter Sofia, 19, helped run the farm while Antonio served. She'd postponed marriage when her fiancé was also conscripted. She maintained household and helped her parents navigate wartime shortages, German occupation, and Allied bombing. The family was deeply Catholic. Church attendance every Sunday, prayers before meals, faith that God would somehow make sense of senseless war. Their parish priest, Father Marco, preached compassion toward all people regardless of nationality, a message that sat uncomfortably with fascist authorities but resonated with farming families tired of war. When Giuseppe saw the parachute tangled in their olive grove at 2:15, he faced immediate choice: ignore it and hope Germans didn't notice, report it to German garrison in Gela, or investigate and possibly help wounded soldier. Maria made the decision for him. We look, if he's dying in our grove, we help. What would you want someone to do for Antonio? That logic, treat enemy soldier as you'd hope enemy treats your son, shaped everything that followed. 3 days of hiding. Giuseppe brought Reilly into the farmhouse kitchen, where Maria immediately began treating his injuries. He'd sprained his ankle in the landing, had cuts from tree branches, and was dehydrated and exhausted. Maria cleaned wounds, wrapped the ankle, gave him water and bread, and spoke to him in Italian, mixed with enough English words to communicate basic care. Sofia watched from the doorway, uncertain about the American paratrooper in their kitchen. He was enemy. His army was invading their country, bombing their cities, killing Italian soldiers, including possibly Antonio, but he was also young, injured, far from home, and clearly terrified.
"Where are you from?"
she asked, in careful English. "Learned in school." "Brooklyn," Reilly answered. "New York." "You have family?" "Mother, 2 sisters. Father died when I was 12. He paused. "Your English is very good." "I study in school before war." Sofia hesitated. "My brother fights against Americans. In Sicily now, defending coast." The words hung in the air, acknowledgement of the war's grotesque irony. This family was helping American soldier while their own son fought Americans. Reilly sheltered, in home of people whose son he might have to shoot if they met in combat. "I'm sorry," Reilly said, not knowing what else to say. Giuseppe interrupted the uncomfortable moment. "Germans patrol road every 2 hours. You must hide in cellar. If they search house, stay silent. We tell them nothing, but if they find you, we say we didn't know you were here. that you hid without our knowledge. Do you understand? Reilly understood the bargain. The Russos would shelter him, but if Germans discovered him, he wouldn't implicate them. It was protection offered with clear-eyed recognition of mutual danger. The cellar was small, damp, and dark. Access through trapdoor and kitchen floor, hidden under a table. The Russos stored preserves, wine, and root vegetables there. They created space for Reilly behind wine barrels, gave him blankets, water, and food. Stay quiet, Giuseppe warned. Germans sometimes search houses. If they come downstairs, do not move, do not breathe loud. Reilly spent 3 days in that cellar, emerging only at night for brief periods when the family was certain no Germans were nearby. He heard German patrols pass on the road, voices, vehicles, boots on cobblestones. He heard Allied planes overhead, bombing runs targeting German positions, anti-aircraft fire responding. He heard distant battle sounds, artillery, small arms fire, as Allied forces pushed inland from landing beaches. And he heard the Russo family, living their lives, cooking, praying, working, arguing, worrying about Antonio. He heard Maria crying one night, when news arrived that village family had lost their son in fighting near Palermo. He heard Sofia reading letters from her fiancé, who was somewhere in northern Italy. He heard Giuseppe, maintaining the farm, feeding animals, working in the garden, trying to preserve normalcy in circumstances that were anything but normal. Reilly felt simultaneously grateful for their help, and guilty for endangering them. Every moment he remained in their house, he increased their risk. If Germans found him, the Russos could be executed as collaborators, but leaving alone without knowing where German positions were would likely get him killed or captured. Father Marco's visit. On the second day, Father Marco visited the farmhouse, his weekly round of checking on parishioners in rural areas. Giuseppe took him aside, told him about the American paratrooper, and asked for guidance. Father Marco's response was immediate. "You are doing right thing. Christ commands us to help the stranger, to show mercy to enemy, to feed the hungry regardless of their army's flag. This soldier is not your enemy. He is a young man following orders from his government. Help him." "But Antonio," Giuseppe started. "Antonio would want you to show mercy," Father Marco said firmly. "If roles were reversed, if Antonio was hiding in American farmhouse, wouldn't you pray that family helped him? Do for this boy what you hope someone does for your son." The logic was unanswerable. Father Marco blessed the family, said prayers for Antonio's safety, and departed. His visit reinforced what the Russos already felt. Helping Reilly was morally correct, even if politically dangerous. That evening, Father Marco discreetly passed word to Allied contacts that American Paratrooper was safe in Russo farmhouse. The message would eventually reach Allied lines, though not in time to affect Reilly's situation. The German search. On the third morning, German patrol conducted house-to-house searches, looking for scattered paratroopers. Wehrmacht sergeant and 3 soldiers arrived at Russo farmhouse at 8 o'clock, banging on door demanding entry. "Giuseppe, let them in." The soldiers were professional, not hostile. Regular Wehrmacht, not SS. The sergeant was polite, but thorough. "We search for American paratroopers. Have you seen any soldiers?" "No," Giuseppe lied. "We heard planes and shooting 2 nights ago. We stay inside when there is fighting." The sergeant nodded. His men searched the house, upstairs bedrooms, barn, outbuildings. They were looking for hidden soldiers or military equipment. They walked through the kitchen, where the trapdoor to the cellar was hidden under the table. Maria served them coffee. Real coffee, rare in wartime, saved for special occasions or emergencies. "You must be tired," she said in Italian. "Sit, have coffee, rest a moment." The sergeant accepted gratefully. His men sat at the kitchen table, directly above where Reilly hid in the cellar below. They drank coffee, smoked cigarettes, complained about the heat and the chaotic battle. Below them, Reilly barely breathed. He could hear every word through the floorboards. The Germans were sitting 4 feet above his head. If they moved the table, they'd see the trap door. If one of them decided to check the cellar, he was caught. One soldier asked, "Do you have basement for storing food?" Reilly's hand moved to his rifle. If they opened that trap door, he'd have to surrender or fight. Either way, the Russo family would be implicated. Maria answered smoothly, "Yes, but entrance is outside, around back, just storage for vegetables." "Would you like to see?" The distraction worked. The sergeant finished his coffee, thanked the Russos, and led his men out back to check the external cellar entrance, which existed but was rarely used, providing access to different section of cellar from where Reilly hid. After the Germans left, Giuseppe opened the trap door. Reilly emerged, shaking. "They were right above me, I thought." "They didn't find you," Maria said firmly. "You are safe. That's what matters." But everyone knew it had been close. Too close. Reilly needed to reach Allied lines before the next German search. The letter. That afternoon, a messenger arrived with letter for the Russos. It was from Antonio. The letter was brief and heavily censored, but its meaning was clear. He was fighting near Palermo. He was alive. He missed them. He hoped the war would end soon so he could come home. Sophia read the letter aloud to the family. Reilly, sitting in the kitchen during daylight hours, now the Germans had already searched the house, listened. When Sophia finished, silence filled the kitchen. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Antonio was fighting Americans. The Allied invasion Antonio had been stationed to defend was happening now. He might be fighting, might be dying, at this very moment. Maria spoke first. "God protect him. Bring him home safe." Giuseppe added quietly, "And protect all the soldiers. All of them, ours and theirs." Reilly understood the weight of that prayer. Giuseppe was praying for American soldiers, soldiers like Reilly, even though those soldiers were fighting his son. The generosity, the moral clarity of refusing to dehumanize enemies, even when they threatened your family, stunned Reilly. "I'm sorry," Reilly said again. "I'm sorry we're fighting your son. I'm sorry I'm in your house, putting you at risk. I'm sorry this war is happening." Sophia looked at him with surprising compassion. "You didn't start war, neither did Antonio. You both do what you must, but you are still people, still deserve mercy. Antonio would want us to help you. I know he would." That evening, Giuseppe told Reilly it was time to leave. Allied lines had advanced. American units were within a few miles now. Giuseppe would guide Reilly toward them, under cover of darkness, bringing him close enough to reach American positions safely.
The departure.
At 22 o'clock hours, Giuseppe and Reilly left the farmhouse. Maria packed food, bread, cheese, olives, wine, more than Reilly could carry, pressing it into his hands with fierce insistence. Sophia gave him a small wooden crucifix. "For protection, bring it home safe. Remember us." Giuseppe led Reilly through olive groves and farm paths, avoiding roads where German patrols traveled. They walked for 2 hours in near silence. Giuseppe navigating by landmarks invisible to Reilly, moving through darkness with lifetime's knowledge of this land. At 0:15, they reached a ridge overlooking valley. Below, fires burned where American forces had set up positions. Giuseppe pointed, "Americans are there. 1 kilometer. Follow the stream downhill, it leads to their camp. Be careful. Germans are between here and there. If you meet them, hide or surrender. Do not fight unless you must." Reilly extended his hand. Giuseppe shook it. "Thank you," Reilly said. "You saved my life. Your family risked everything for me. I can never repay that." "You can," Giuseppe said quietly. "If you meet Italian soldiers, remember they are like Antonio, someone's son, someone's brother. Show them mercy if you can. That is how you repay us." "I will," Reilly promised. "If I meet Antonio out there—" "You won't know it's him," Giuseppe interrupted. "He won't know it's you. You are just soldiers to each other. But remember, he is human. So are you. Do not forget that even in combat." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Giuseppe embraced Reilly briefly. Sicilian farewell. acknowledging that this young man had been part of their family for 3 days, that bonds formed in war could be deep even if brief. Giuseppe turned and walked back toward his farmhouse. Reilly watched him disappear into darkness, then began moving downhill toward American lines. He reached 82nd Airborne positions at 2:30, challenged by sentries, identified himself, and was brought to his commanding officer. Over the next 2 days, he'd rejoin his unit, participate in push toward Palermo, and fight through Sicily campaign. But he never forgot the Russo family, the Italians who sheltered him while their own son fought against his army, who risked execution to help an enemy, because mercy mattered more than nationality, who taught him that the war's black and white clarity dissolved when you met actual people on the other side. Antonio's fate. Corporal Antonio Russo survived the Sicily campaign. His unit fought delaying actions against American advance near Palermo, suffered heavy casualties, but Antonio came through without serious injury. When Italy surrendered in September 1943, he deserted rather than choosing between fighting for German occupiers or joining allies. He made his way home to the farm, where the family reunited in tearful joy. Antonio learned about the American paratrooper his family had sheltered. His initial reaction was complicated. Anger that enemy soldier had endangered his family, pride that they'd shown mercy, relief they'd survived, recognition that he'd want similar help if roles were reversed. "Did you ever meet any Americans?" Sophia asked him. "Yes," Antonio said quietly. "I killed some. Some tried to kill me. We were soldiers doing what soldiers do. But I also saw American medic treating wounded Italian prisoners with same care he showed his own wounded. I saw American officers sharing rations with Italian civilians when they didn't have to. War makes enemies of people who could be friends." The Russo family survived the war. Giuseppe and Maria continued farming. Sophia married her fiancé when he returned in 1945. Antonio married a local woman and took over the farm when Giuseppe retired. The war became history, painful history, memories they didn't discuss casually, experiences that shaped them but didn't define them. The reunion. In 1968, James Reilly returned to Sicily. He'd spent 25 years thinking about the Russo family, wondering if they'd survived, wanting to thank them properly. He'd kept Sophia's crucifix, carrying it through the war, and keeping it afterward as reminder of mercy received when he'd expected only danger. Finding the farmhouse proved difficult. He remembered the landscape but not specific location, and Sicily had changed dramatically in 25 years of reconstruction. He hired a guide, described the area, and eventually found the farm. Giuseppe and Maria were elderly but still living. Sophia had married and moved to Palermo but visited frequently. Antonio ran the farm now with wife and 3 children. Reilly knocked on the door. An older woman answered, Maria, aged but recognizable. She stared at him, not recognizing the middle-aged man in civilian clothes. "My name is James Reilly," he said in careful Italian. He'd learned for this visit. "In 1943, you sheltered me when I was paratrooper. You saved my life." Maria's expression transformed. Shock, joy, tears. She embraced him, calling for Giuseppe, for Antonio, for Sophia to come immediately. Within the hour, the entire family had gathered. They spent 3 days together. Reilly met Antonio, the brother who'd fought for Italy while Reilly fought for America, whose welfare had motivated his family's mercy. The 2 veterans talked carefully at first, then with increasing comfort, discovering they'd been in Sicily at same time, had fought in overlapping areas, might have shot at each other without knowing it. "I'm glad we didn't meet in combat," Reilly said. "So am I," Antonio replied. "Though if we had, maybe one of us would have shown mercy. Maybe your training and my family's teaching would have meant we both survived." Reilly gave the family gifts, impossible to repay mercy, but tokens of gratitude nonetheless. Money, which they initially refused, but eventually accepted. Books about America for the children. New crucifix for Maria to replace the one Sophia had given him, which he returned. But the real gift was simpler. Reilly's presence proved that their risk had mattered. They'd saved his life. He'd returned to honor that gift, to let them know he'd never forgotten, that their mercy had echoed through 25 years of his life. On his last evening, sitting at the same kitchen table where Germans had drunk coffee while he hid below, Reilly told them, "I met dozens of Italians during the war. Some shot at me. Some surrendered to me. But your family taught me what I try to teach my children, that enemies are people, that mercy is strength, not weakness, that the hardest choices, risking yourselves to help someone who shouldn't matter to you, are the ones that define who we are." Giuseppe, now 83 and frail, responded, "You would have done same for Antonio. I believe this. War makes enemies of good people, but goodness remains underneath, if we remember to look for it." The legacy. The Russo family's story wasn't unique. Throughout Sicily's invasion, Italian civilians faced impossible choices: help Allied soldiers and risk German reprisal, help German soldiers and risk Allied reprisal, or remain neutral and risk both sides' suspicion. Many families chose mercy. Sicilian civilians hid American and British soldiers, treated wounded, guided them to Allied lines, despite knowing German occupiers would execute them if discovered. The motivations varied. Some opposed fascism, some hated German occupation, some wanted Allied victory, but many, like the Russos, simply couldn't let young men die when they could help, regardless of uniforms or flags. Estimates suggest several hundred Allied soldiers were sheltered by Sicilian families during the campaign. Many civilians died protecting these soldiers, shot by Germans, killed in crossfire, executed as collaborators. The risks were real, and often fatal. But the families who showed mercy created bonds that lasted generations. Allied veterans returned after the war to thank families who'd saved them. Children of saved soldiers visited decades later to honor deceased rescuers. The mercy showed in 1943 rippled through time, connecting families across national boundaries, proving that even war's worst violence couldn't completely destroy human compassion. The Russo family never considered themselves heroes. Giuseppe's words to later interviewers captured their perspective. "We did what we would hope others would do for our son. Nothing more. Nothing heroic. Just human." But their mercy was heroic precisely because it was human. Choosing compassion when hatred was easier, risking themselves for enemy when self-preservation was logical, maintaining humanity when war encouraged its abandonment. The lesson. The story resonates because it captures war's most profound contradiction. Enemies forced to fight can recognize each other's humanity even while trying to kill each other. The Russo family sheltered Reilly while their son fought Americans. That impossible situation, helping one side while family member fights for the other, should have made mercy impossible. Instead, it clarified what mercy required. Giuseppe and Maria couldn't protect Antonio. He was beyond their reach, fighting somewhere in Sicily under orders they couldn't control. But they could protect Reilly. The enemy soldier in their olive grove was immediate, reachable, savable. Helping him didn't betray Antonio. It honored the humanity both sons represented. The broader lesson extends beyond WWI. Even in wars fought with national determination, even when soldiers follow orders to kill, even when families suffer on both sides, individual people retain capacity for mercy. They can shelter enemies, treat opponents wounded, show compassion to those they're supposed to hate. These acts don't stop wars. The Russos saving Reilly didn't prevent Sicily campaign's violence. Reilly still fought Italian soldiers after leaving their farm. Antonio still fought Americans. The war continued with all its killing and suffering. But the mercy mattered profoundly to those involved. Reilly survived because the Russos chose compassion over safety. The Russos' faith in human goodness was validated when Reilly returned to honor them. Antonio learned his family's values meant something real when demonstrated under pressure. Sophia's children and grandchildren inherited story about ancestors who risked everything to help enemy because mercy was right. 70 years later, that lesson endures. Descendants of James Reilly and Antonio Russo maintain contact. The farmhouse, still in Russo family ownership, contains photos of the 1968 reunion. Local historians have documented the story as example of Sicilian civilians' wartime courage. The kitchen where Germans drank coffee while American paratrooper hid below where the Russo family fed enemy soldier while their son fought his army. Where mercy prevailed over fear, that room became shrine to the possibility of maintaining humanity even in war's worst circumstances. Giuseppe's prayer remains relevant. Protect all the soldiers. All of them, ours and theirs. That refusal to dehumanize enemies, that insistence that all soldiers deserve mercy, regardless of flag they serve, that's the story's lasting gift. The war made Reilly and Antonio enemies, but the Russo family's mercy proved that enmity need not be absolute, that compassion can persist alongside conflict, that individuals can choose humanity even when nations choose violence. That choice, helping the enemy in your olive grove while your son fights that enemy's army, defines courage more clearly than any battlefield heroism. It proves that mercy isn't weakness, but the hardest strength, that compassion requires more bravery than killing, and that the bonds formed by choosing humanity over hatred can outlast war itself.